talk about ministry to women in prison, and a few things that we need to know. And one, can you imagine yourself behind bars? Look at the anatomy of a prison cell, 6x8 or 6x9. Clothes, maybe one person in the cell, maybe two people in the cell. One commode, um, one sink. Um, Everything is closed. So if you're two people in there, can you imagine that's going to be kind of tight and tough and unpleasant because you're used to going to your own bathroom and you can close the door. But now you can't close the door. You don't have curtains that you can pull back unless you put a sheet up there to keep somebody from looking in. And some of the commodes are shiny, some are rusty, some are old looking. And you got living quarters, maybe mildew. You never can tell how exactly it's going to look. But if you're two people in the room, everybody got to smell their own stink, just to put it bluntly. So it can get pretty raunchy at time in a cell. And if you try to imagine you being there, it would be kind of rough. And you think how rough it'll be for you, then think about how rough it is for them. You can't go, you don't have privileges where you can just, I want to get up and go to the mall today. Well, the closest shopping mall you get to is the prison commissary. And the closest eating place you get to is the dining hall. The mess hall, as they call it sometimes. And really, sometimes it's a mess. Because you have guys and ladies who are cooking and who have never cooked a day in their life. But now they're cooks and they're preparing your food. Sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the oatmeal be okay on your plate, and other times you can throw it all the way to the back wall and it'll stick on there. So that's the way it goes. It's like going into a different world. There used to be a program come on and say a different world. That's what it's like, going to a different world, somewhere that you really don't want to go. There's no refrigerators, no kitchen or bathroom privileges that you would have at home. You can't go to McDonald's. You can't go to the refrigerator and get some orange juice out or a glass of milk. There's nothing there. The only food you have in your cell will be what you buy from the commissary. And that's if you have money. And if you don't have a job, then you can't do that. And so sometimes you have to depend on a friend to smuggle stuff out in the kitchen so that you'd have something that you can eat at night. And it can be pretty rough on a person. And even if you're working, the prices in the commissary are almost as high as the prices outside. And so if you're unskilled, Tennessee, they were paying them 17 cents an hour for unskilled, 34 cents an hour for semi-skilled, 50 cents an hour for skilled. And you couldn't work but 6 hours a day. Now you do the math and see how much money you have at the end of the week. You wouldn't have much. You probably end up getting maybe the guys might be able to buy, they call it zuzus and wham wham, that's cakes and pies. That's about all they can get. But just imagine people who are behind bars and what they're going through. You no longer have control over your space. The lady doesn't. And they're usually incarcerated a long ways from home, because they usually, in most states, there are no more than 2, maybe 3 women's prisons. In some states, you may just have one. And it's almost like they're from one end of the state to the other end of the state in order to get to a female facility. And it's tough on them, but nowadays it seems like the women prison population is the fastest growing part of the prison population. Um, Actually, over the last 10 years, the prison population has really jumped up. The statistic will probably come up a little later, like 138% have increased more than men. But since probably the 90s, the prison population for women have gone up like 500 and some percent. There used to be a time when a lady could cry in the court, shed a few crocodile tears, and the judge would have mercy. But that doesn't work anymore. Because women are doing crime now just as tough as men are. And of course, everybody's been looking at the Casey Anthony trial and seeing what happened. And you see ladies driving trucks and vans into rivers and killing all of the kids. Just getting rough. The crimes are getting tough among women now. And if you want to see somebody get real mean, you get a tough, mean lady, and you got some drama on your hand. And they can wear you out too. So it's not a thing that men can handle ladies or beat them up or nothing like that. No, that don't happen now like it used to. Not only that, a lot of women in prison are there because their husbands did try to abuse them and they got the drops on them and they took them out. And that happens a lot. The vast majority of women who are in prison are poor, and most of them were unemployed prior to incarceration. And in fact, a lot of the women yearly income range from $2,000 to $10,000 a year prior to incarceration. Now, you tell me, how do you live off of that? And you got children. A lot of women are in prison because they got tied up with some knucklehead that used them as a front. They took the fall for him. They get locked up. He go to the next woman. And she's in. She think he's going to write her, think he's going to send her money. She never get a penny from him. And so she's the victim, and she's suffering. And now she got a track record. And usually, if you don't get in and work real close with her, when she get out, she's going to get back into some of the same stuff and right back in prison again. That's why this ministry among women is so needed. And women have some real serious problems at the prison that they need help with. Does it make them worse than anybody else? No. It's just that the emotional drama that they experience is so traumatic that they don't know what to do. It's frustrating. If someone come in and just take interest in them, that would be a big turnaround as far as them getting out and making it. Sometimes women get taken advantage of, even by employees, especially if it's male security officers. A lot of times women get sexually exploited by security officers. Some of them get pregnant right there in prison. And it's a sad thing that they have to go through that. But, it's a fact that you can't deny that it does happen. And some guys are able to stay there and work, but most of the time when they find out that kind of action going on, the employee gets fired. But if the lady's pregnant, she got a baby for a lifetime. So someone that she got to deal with, if she doesn't have anyone to take care of that child goes to the state. So the state makes money off of both of them, off of the child and the person who's locked up. Ethnic groups comprise the largest segment of the prison population, and most women prisoners are mothers. In fact, you have um, roughly, I think about 75% of the women in prison are mothers. Well, it could be a few more than that because there's about 198,000 women who are locked up in prison. Um, and so a lot of them have children. And when the children don't have a mother at home, it really makes it difficult. So now who has the children? Will that be a parent, a grandparent, a cousin, a sister, a brother that will step up? Will these children go to be a ward of the state? And once the state get control of your children, it's not an easy thing to get them back. So it takes some time, and especially if you got a record and what they want to say that you're an unfit mother. So it takes a lot of work to get them back into the frame of mind that they need to make some changes and turn their lives around. The female incarceration has increased by 138 success. Success for women prisoners is something that is rare. And why is it rare? Because they have no one to come in and work with them and motivate them. They need to be motivated. They need to be made to feel that they are somebody in spite of what they are going through. And a lot of women cannot get, the same kind of help that men get. I see men. I have seen men and women who have committed the same crime, but the women got more time than the men got. It's called disparity of sentencing. That happens quite often. And female prisoners usually have low self-concept. Their self-esteem is down. They have a problem with acceptance, and they just need someone to help build them up. And that's why the need is so great inside of the women's prison. We all like to go in the men's prison and work, but in the women's prison there is a big, big need to help them. It's serious. When I see them, and they go through a lot of the same struggles that men go through. They are there, they're by themselves. Some of them feel like their companionship must be female to female. And sometimes when we have to upset the rooms and move roommates around, they get mad because they tell us that we're breaking up families and they've found somebody that they want to be with and share their life with, and the relationship becomes, one that is intimate in terms of, what I'm saying. And so it gets rough and they complain a lot about that. And so they would tell me, well, I got to have somebody. And that's how they are feeling. And so when lady come in to me and she said, "Chaplain, pray for me." She said, I've contracted, STDs from my partner, and I need to pray that I be healed. Well, I can pray for you, but if you're going to do the same thing, then you can't be healed. But you gotta change your way of life, and you need to be able to work. But the thing that I was pretty much happy with in working in the women's prison was that my office was a glass office, and so that no one could try to play games on you. And my clerk, she was a 38-year-old white female from East Tennessee, and I love her to death. Because she would always make sure that nobody pulled nothing Army. She always made sure that the women got whatever things they need for their spiritual needs. Um, she was just super, and I always said that she could probably go into the White House and help them straighten out stuff, because she was just that smart and just that good. And the only reason she was locked up, she got 40 years. Her husband used to come home and beat her and the kids, and she got the drops on him, and she killed him. And she got almost a life sentence just for protecting herself, and which I think that's a sad law that they have in criminal justice. Because what is a woman going to do? And you come in and you're a man and you're stronger than them, and you beat them, and they can't fight back. And when they do get the drops on you, they go for to be like what was it, Sylvester? Not with Sylvester, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. They turn into the Terminator because this is the only way that they can protect themselves, and they go for getting rid of the whole problem. But women go through a lot of things inside of the prisons that we may not even be able to fathom when we're on the outside. Most of them have morality issues. They have been misused by men and addicted on drugs at a young age. And that's one of the sad things about women coming into prison, how they have been abused and misused. And so what kind of mentality do you get? You get it's okay to go through that. Do I think women want to be succumbed to that? No. I think that they got caught into a lifestyle, and it's just like a lot of time when the fathers rape their children, the children get caught in a lifestyle. They don't want to blow the whistle. The moms won't believe them. They keep it in, and they act out, and the parents want to know, well, what's wrong with this girl? Well, what's wrong with her that she's been raped, and she's been continuously raped by a father or a cousin or uncle or someone who I guess I would have very little respect for doing your own child that way. And you messed up a child's life for a lifetime. And those scars are going to be there. When the lady used to come in my office and they would tell me how they've been raped by their fathers, and I called a lady in one day and I told her that her father died. She still was crying and real profusely and saying that, oh, say he's dead, but I still feel like he got control on me because she had been abused by him so much sexually. And so it's kind of a rough situation. And when I look at it, 82% of those women who had gone through the prison system, who come into the Tennessee prison system, they had been raped as a child. And so it continuously, and life just got kind of spiraling out of control. And I hate for those kind of situations to pop up when children have to go through all that. Children are more than that. Girls are so tender, and they need that kind of direction, so you can put them on the right road, and not feeling us as men feeling like that we have to do those kinds of things to our daughters or any other girl that's young. And no matter whether they're our daughter or somebody else, we don't have that right to invade them like that. And I know that might be a little bit stern what I'm saying, but I just have a real problem when those kinds of things happen. Drug offense accounts for more than half of the female population in state prisons. And a lot of people who come to prison for drug offenses don't need to come. A lot of them need to go to drug treatment centers. And so what we do, we waste a whole lot of money sending them to prison. So sending them to prison not going to treat them with if they got a drug problem, because they can get anything they want in prison, and they can stay high for 10 years if they want to be high, and we can't stop them. And so most wardens would rather for an inmate to be high on cocaine and marijuana than to be drunk. Because when you're drunk on alcohol, boy, it's a mess. If you ever have you ever had the experience of dealing with a drunk, then you know what I'm talking about. Because they usually tell you what's on their mind when they're drunk. That's what they've been wanting to tell you all the time. And they'll tell you. So we had one guy who they stole some sugar and some cherries out of the kitchen, and they made some 85% proof. And guys were drunk all over the compound. And it took about 8 or 9 security officers to get one guy up to the hospital because he was so rowdy. But that's what alcohol does for you. It makes you think that you're Hulk Hogan, and that you can handle anything, do anything, and you're not scared of anything. But what I'm really trying to stress in this whole thing here is the fact that we don't need a lot of people locked up in prison for drugs. If it's a drug dealer, then he had to pay the price. If it's somebody who's there because they're abuser, then they don't need to be there. They need to be in a treatment center. 1 in 3 females are incarcerated for drug abuse. Violent offenses count for 20% of the female prison population. So most people in prison are not even there for violent offenses. Some things could be done in a better way. Some people don't need to be locked up in prison. Some people could be on house arrest. Some people could be on community corrections instead of in the big house. Some people learn their lesson in 2 days in prison. They could come out and wouldn't do anything else. Some people need 2 prison sentences to try to get it right. Right. And so it takes a lot for some people. So some people, God had to put them in isolation so they could get a revelation. Yeah, so like he had to put Jonah in the belly of a whale, some people he had to put in the cell of a jail for them to get it together. So God knows what it takes to get some people life together. Murder accounts for 1/3 of the female incarceration for violent crime. And most of the murders that we said before only comes because she was trying to protect herself from violence, from a spouse. Okay. Women in prison for homicide are twice as likely to have killed a husband or a boyfriend. And that's where the stat I was giving in terms of ladies being locked up for defending themselves. Fraud accounts for about 10% of the crimes committed by women in prison. A lot of women in prison are there because of property crime, credit cards, things that deal with monetary. Now, I ask you this question. What sense does it make to lock somebody up in prison for shoplifting? None whatsoever. What I would do for a shoplifter is I would make them work and pay it back 20 times. And so it would hurt their pocketbook and they would learn that I can't do this. But why do we have to spend $40,000 a year to keep somebody for stealing $1,000 worth of goods locked up in a prison cell? And it's just a drain of us in the economic community. It never made sense to me. But the people who work in the legislature and all that, they have to live up to their campaign promises that they're going to clean the streets and they're going to get people locked behind bars who commit crime. Law and order. But some of the law and order is just simply foolish at the way that they do it. And maybe you may not recognize it, but the criminal justice system is totally rotten. It has it's not fair at all. And so a lot of things happen that don't need to happen. Sometimes they get ladies and men to enter into plea bargains and say, but if you don't take this crime here, then we're going to put these crimes here on you. And so if you can take a plea for 5 years, or you have those other crimes over there which you didn't have anything to do with, but the police don't know who did them, so they're going to put them on you, so that you will come down and say, well, I plea bargained for 5 years. And what you plea bargained for, you probably may not have done that either, but you don't want to go to prison for a long length of time. So what does it do? It shows you how rotten the system is. If you can't prove that a guy committed a crime, then you don't need to try to put crimes on him that you can't prove that he did. So it's just a fairness of the system. I don't believe in crime, but I don't believe that you need to dump things on people just because you think that they did it. 71% of all state prisoners have been behind bars before. And that just attests to the fact that about every 3 years, it's a possibility that somebody's going to go back. At least 7 out of 10 going to go back to prison in a 3-year period of time. Half of the women in prison said that they committed their crimes under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And more than half used drugs in the month prior to their incarceration. And 2/5 had used drugs daily. And that shows you the impact of drugs on crime committed. About 85 to 95% of the people in prison had some kind of drug influence in their lives that caused them to be locked up. So drugs is an evil monster. It's like one time that you take drugs is too many, and 1,000 times is not enough. It's like an elusive butterfly. You keep searching for that first high that you got, and you never catch it. Women's prisons have significant history of physical and sexual abuse, and those things I already mentioned. About 82% of the women in prison have been sexually abused. Most of them were abused before they were 18 years of age. And women behind bars, they do not even like themselves or have very little respect for themselves. Why? Their self-esteem is low. So they need a lot of help. And sometimes only you can do that, coming in and helping them. Many of them have been alcoholics or drug addicts whose lives are out of control. Many of them are depressed, angry, enough to kill themselves or someone else. And what it really amounts to, that they're hopeless. And if you are hopeless, then somebody needs to try to help you to get some. And then we know where the hope comes from. We know that it comes from Christ. And he's the one that gives it. Many of them are con artists and will say anything to get their way. And I've found that to be especially true when it comes to using the telephone. And they can come up with some real stories on why we need to let them use the phone. But I found out with women just like men. They would go to everybody in the prison that will let them use the phone. And then when they get to you, they will say they haven't gotten a phone call. But they would probably have made 4 phone calls before they get to you. And so you'll be the last one. And sometimes, you could be hard and say, well, I'm sorry, you can't let you use the phone. But I found out that when you in a service capacity working for people, that there are times you're going to be vulnerable. And there are times you're going to get burnt when you're in a service capacity. If you've never been burnt in a service capacity, then you're too hard. Because there are times that you're going to, and I'm not saying that you ought to be a glutton and get burnt to show that you're not too, that you're compassionate. But I'm just saying that it's just a reality, that those kind of things happen. There's somebody that can get the best of you and get over on you. I don't care how good you are. The only person they can't get over on is Jesus. But us as humans, they get us. Women in prison need emotional security. Emotional needs for women is very key. They need to feel emotionally secure and to feel good about themselves. To feel like they are someone that they are loved. They need those feelings. Those things are tied into emotions, women. And women are emotional people. Men tend to be a little bit more practical, and they don't always feel the emotional things that women go through. And because of the way that we are made differently gender-wise. And so that's just kind of like a fact that takes place. But that's neither here nor there. The thing that I want to stress is that the emotional needs that women have can only be seen and probably helped by another woman who understands a woman. And we as men, we will not be able to see where a woman comes from. A woman knows another woman and how they think and how they operate. And my wife is good, at working with other women. She can figure out things and pretty much read what's going on. And that's just a gift that she had, and she's good at working with other females. And so she would tell me sometimes, well, you're just so naive that you just don't see. And I can't argue with her about that because she sees things that I don't see because she has a sixth sense that I don't have. And that's women's intuition. I don't have that. So I have to listen. And even though what she's saying, I'm not actually thinking about it, but she said, well, you just don't know what other people are thinking. And I probably don't. I'm sure I don't. So I listen to what she's saying. And the only thing that we have to be careful about as men is that we don't get pig-headed and we don't listen. So it'll save us a lot of trouble. I'd rather make an error on the side of caution than on the other side of the fence. They need to know that someone cares for them. Definitely need to know that. And I'm stressing things right now that other women can really reach out and touch these women in prison. Women in prison need personal care through regular visitation. Someone needs to go in and visit them all the time. There are a lot of women probably don't get visitations, And I know I was happy at the women's prison that we had so many volunteers to come in to see the women. And it was almost like 200 volunteers just coming in that one prison. And I was happy to see that. And we had, sometime I would just give them little tapes. All we had was just, tapes like T.D. Jakes and Woman Thou Art Loose and things like that at the women's prison the short time that I was there. And they would take those tapes and put them in the VCR, and the preaching would start, and the women would be getting happy, and I'd look over in the little worship room, and they would be in there shouting and praising the Lord because there was a need that need to be met. And that's why it's so important to have women coming into the prison ministering to other women. So you know what makes them tick, so you can help them. And so I hope that that we can get more involvement from women into women's prisons. Women prisoners who attend religious services regularly have lower recidivism rates. In other words, they don't come back to prison. The women who attend services, and it's interesting to note how religion plays a part in women staying out of prison. And one of the things that I noted is that when we as Adventists go into the prison, and when we teach them about Jesus, and when they come out and become a member of our church and are actively involved, the chances of them going back to prison is almost nil. That's right. Because this message that we have is a life-changing message. And I can testify the fact, because when I came into this church, it changed me. Things that I used to do, I dropped them. I stayed out the clubs, I stopped the drinking, I stopped running the streets, and I started trying to do the right thing. And then what it does, it gives you a desire to want to improve your life. Because once I got into the Adventist church, and where I had been kind of just wandering along trying to get a bachelor's degree, Tuskegee University and University of Alabama. When I got to Oakwood, I just flew right through. And then I flew right through Andrews and right on through the doctoral program. And even at my age today, I'm trying to work on a second doctorate. I'm in the third phase of a dissertation. I wanted to do something in prison ministry. And so that's what I'm doing now, in urban ministry with emphasis on prison ministry. And I thought I was too old to be up there, but then there was somebody older than me. Yeah. So, last month, it's still July, I guess. Well, July 12th, I turned 67. And so I'm up there, and I know as my daughter tell me, you old. Yes, I'm old. I said, I don't feel old. I feel like pretty much like I did when I was 35 or 40. And so the Lord just been good to me. Okay. There are some common needs. We talked about this earlier. And this was some of this we'll move briefly across. And of course, and that was transportation, getting ladies to the children to the prison to see them. And it's important, because when you're able to keep families together, when they come out, then they don't go back to prison because you have strengthened in that family. So it's important for women to be able to work with women and their children to help strengthen that family. Toiletries, we talked about this, and the reason I stuck toiletries in this part is that that women in prison usually can't find jobs. There are only a few jobs in prison that women can get. Most of the women in prison don't have a job. And so they don't have money. And so many times I had not only had churches bring in toiletries, but I had them to bring in paper and greeting cards. There's a place in Florida. I think it's called Allegiance. Um, Allegiance something card or something like that. But you can order like 500 cards, and it's very cheap, like $10 or $15 or somewhere in there. And those are enough cards to give where usually people can come in and get 2, 3, 4, and 5 cards sometimes. Because what we would do, we would just order like 2,000 cards, and we would let inmates come up and get greeting cards to send home to their children for birthdays and different kinds of special occasions. But in the toiletry ministry, there are just a whole lot of different things that you can do to help women who are locked up and they need it. Volunteer literacy, 58% of the women inmates are high school dropout. It's a pressing need to have tutors for women who are in prison. They need help because usually it's somewhere between 37 and 50% of the women in prison are literate and the rest are not. So they need your help in terms of volunteer literacy. And they need people to tutor them and to help them through these. They need people to help them for college level. You might just want to be a proctor for someone to give them their tests in prison. And I helped two people to work on their degrees. And I don't know how many of you read any books by Jairus Bregan. He's a prolific writer, but I was his proctor that he received a bachelor's degree in history and psychology and worked on his master's from Vermont College. But Jairus has several books that are out there, and if you start reading his books, you won't put it down. You'll read it all the way through. He's just that good of a writer. Jairus Bregan. Bragan. And he wrote things like, A Detective in Search of Grace, Scandalous Grace, those kind of books like that, and those are good books that he wrote. And so, but what I'm stressing again is that in the volunteer literacy ministry that you can do to help women, they definitely need that. And I've found that women who get an education inside of prison, that 82% of them don't come back. And it shows the corresponding relationship between education and staying out. In fact, 82% of our high school boys from the 10th grade back that drop out of school enter prison. They come to prison. If they would finish school, they wouldn't be there. So it's really a great need all the way around. Because if you don't plan to get an education, then you plan to steal because you got to take care of yourself. And the way that they construct prisons now is that they base it on the Chicago manual. And that is they look at third graders. And they build a prison based off third graders and how they act and what's going on with them. And so if you have young people, children, just realize that they're building those prisons for your children and not necessarily you, because you're probably past that. Because most of the time, guys from 18 to to 30, they're very aggressive, and that's an aggressive age where you find the majority of men locked up in prison. After 30, they start slowing down, and that's when I began to understand what my cousin used to tell me about men. And he used to tell me that, a man doesn't have sense enough to go home until he gets 30. And now I understood what he meant, because the aggressiveness of the man slows down at 30. And so the men who are locked up become less after they pass that age. Okay, so the life skills and training for women inmates have a vital need for survival skills. Skills that we take for granted are totally foreign to them. Things like how to budget, how to interview for a job, how to balance a checkbook. If you want to teach survival skills to women, there is a booklet. It's actually more than a book. It's about this thick. It's called Survival Skills. And all the things that women need to know to survive on the outside, you can find help in that book to help them. And things that you take for granted and you think women just know, they don't know. So they need help. And who can best provide that help would be you. A lot of women don't even know how to be good parents. And you already have parenting skills. You have materials that they need that you could help them with. Music ministry is another ministry that you can do in a women's prison. Providing music on a regular basis, having a choir in prison. People like to sing even when they're locked up. The ladies like it, the guys like it to sing. And I've heard some guys that could really sing that was in prison. We had one guy in Tennessee, Vic, could sing like Al Green. Actually, he sounded like Al Green. And he had such a beautiful voice in singing. And in fact, it was 4 of those guys in prison, and they had the Today Show actually came to the prison and taped them. And they cut an album, and the album was really a nice album. But some of the guys weren't going to get out for eons, so they're still there. And one of the guys that could sing so good, he got out, and then he tried to break in somebody's house, and he was back in. So it was just sad. It's almost like, well, he went home to scratch a match, so then he's coming on back. I went to pack his suitcase for his return trip. He didn't stay there out very long, and it was sad because I was hoping that he was going to make it because he had too much to offer. But when the devil get a hold of you, he doesn't care. He tries to destroy you and make sure that you don't succeed. This is another kind of ministry that they can do in prison. It's called a Quilting Ministry. It's really therapeutic, it's artistic, and it expresses love. Because what you can do after they finish making the quilt is that they donate it to someone who really don't have cover, who is in need to keep warm in the winter, and it's an act of love. Inmates like to give. They like to do things that will help other people. And you might think that they're locked up sometime and they don't care about folks, but that's not true. They really care. Because I remember a lady's house burning down. She lost everything that she had. The guys saw it on the news that evening, and they got up right away. They got together, and they couldn't have money. They don't supposed to have money inside the prison, but people do. Have more than I have. But they got together, and they went to the I guess we call it the controller, the accountant at the prison, who keep up with the funds, and they all turned in little voucher slips to him for them to take money out of their account to give to this lady. And they raised $700. And they had the lady to come out to the prison, and they presented it to her. She was, excited and just elated, and they were excited too because they had been able to help somebody. And so the inmates do like to help. And women who would be in the quilting ministry, they would like to help. And it would be a joy to them to be able to help somebody. Most women in jail are addicted to drugs, alcohol as a result of being in vile family situations, such as violence, incest, those kinds of things. And so they would love to be sober. How can they become sober? By Alcohol Anonymous meeting. Now, if you are a pristine saint and you never done anything in your life, you've been sheltered, are you qualified to teach AA? No, you're not. You have to be a person who have had this experience. Because a person who's been on alcohol and drugs, they really have a PhD in it. Guys who are out on the street selling drugs and so forth, they street pharmacists because they know all of this stuff. So people who are on alcohol and drugs, definitely they know how to teach it. They know what you're going through. They know what it takes to stay sober. So every church should have an AA program, or you should be hooked in to somewhere that you can make sure that people get the treatment that they need. So we started an AA program in our church in Nashville, and it was one of the guys got with me and a couple other persons, and they started it. And now there are about 50 people come to AA, which has been a real blessing to that community. So it's a matter of just opening your church up so that ministry can be done. And this is a program that can be done. It doesn't really cost you a whole lot. Just opening the doors and letting somebody come in and teach it and making it available to the community. And your church is already on the map for something. And so we want to make sure we can be on the map. Like that song says, sign my name, sign me up. You want to be that way. Pen Pal Ministry. When you're doing pen pal ministry, pray for wisdom and discernment when you're doing that. In fact, you want the Holy Ghost to guide your fingertips so that you will write the right thing. Avoid asking when you're doing pen pal ministry, don't ask the person, what are you in prison for? No, don't do that. That's one thing I never asked an inmate in all of my time of working in the prison. What are you in here for? If they want me to know, they'll tell me. So one of the things that happened to me in prison, and I didn't solicit it, but all the guys started calling me Pops. And they said I was the father that they never had. And so they did a lot of things. I really never had to go out and get haircuts because the guys were the barbers, and they make sure they'd come over and offer, no, let me cut your hair. And they would do that. And it's just a matter of being involved with people and helping them. And they never had to worry about me trying to set them up or anything. I always stayed fair and above board with them, and they were above board with me. Don't write preachy letters. Sometimes I hear people say, well, they need to be preached to. Well, no. No more than I need to be preached to. So we don't want to write preachy letters and make it sound like we're writing a sermon to them. Just be positive and honest and upbeat in your writing. Make them take an introspective look within themselves and see the positive value in your writing, that I'm only writing trying to elevate you in Christ and to make you feel better about yourself and know that all is not lost regardless of what you've done. Share Bible promises and funny stories with them. And there are a lot of funny stories that you can get. They're funny, but they're wholesome that you can write. Be regular and dependable in your writing. If you're going to be a pen pal to someone, try to be dependable and correspond on some type of systematic way. Don't make promises that you can't keep. In your letters, don't promise them that I'm going to send you some money. I'm going to send you a pair of tennis shoes. Never do that. Because that can be expensive. And two, then that can end up getting you in trouble too. So that would be staying above board with that. Don't give out your phone number and your address when you're doing pen pal ministries. They come to your church. Or either get you a post office box and let it come to a post office box. And that way nobody can trace you under any circumstances. And it's good if you're a relative. You have a relative and you have a post office box, that's still good. At least they know that even though your name might be there, the post office box is something that they can't trace to your house. Don't send money and gifts. Never get caught in that trap, because somebody will ask you. They'll try you and see if you'll do it, but don't do it. You'll stay out of trouble. Don't give your name when you're doing pen pal ministry. Just use a pen pal name. If your name is Betty, use Sue. You just give them a pen pal name. And so that protects your name. Don't send in items without the approval of prison officials. If you have any questions, always ask the chaplain. It's no crime to ask, but it may be one if you don't. So make sure you ask. Don't use words that will give the inmate the wrong impression. You don't want them to think that you're seeking a relationship, or that it's okay if you start one. Make sure that is clarity in that area. Bible studies, these come under spiritual and religious ministries. Bible studies that you can give. And some of the best Bible study, I tell you what, my favorite Bible study is lesson, and that's Amazing Facts. That's my favorite, absolute favorite. There are several that you can use, but that's my strongest recommendation. And they're so simple. They have pictures, and inmates like to look at pictures, because I do too. And they have the text there, and they have questions. The questions make sense. The questions are interesting. And the text is there, and it helps to make everything real, very simple, and so that you can grasp it. Okay, church service behind the walls. Most of our churches who come in, they want to come in and preach. But let me suggest to you that if you can't get behind the wall and teach and preach, try to find another ministry that you can do behind the wall. Sometimes the prison has needs. It may be in pre-release counseling. It may be in just counseling. It could be in the need for help in the GED program or literacy program. And what you're doing as a team is that you're providing a service that the prison needs. So the prison really needs. So my philosophy is a George Jefferson philosophy. It's more than one way to skin a cat. Sometimes you might have to enter into the prison in a different way. You might have to enter into some of those services, support services that the prison needs. And in the process, you're driving a wedge in that can open up for you to get in and do those religious things like teaching and preaching that you might want to do, or Bible studies. So what you're building is confidence with the system, and before you know it, because of your faithfulness in what you're doing, they say, well, you can come on in, we'll try to work out a slot for you. But that's just a suggestion, if things, you can't get inside of a system. And the way it goes now, sometimes it seems like it's hard for Adventists to get in because of hang-ups that chaplains have. And there's never a reason why a chaplain should have a hang-up about another denomination. Because what makes our work easy as a chaplain is when we have all different faith groups coming in to service their people who need them. If it's Baptist, let me have the Baptists. If it's Catholic, let me have the Catholics. If it's Church of Christ, Pentecostal, Church of God, let me have them. And I always try to make a slot somewhere so that those who want to come in and provide for their faith group could get in and do so. Distribution of inspirational literature and Christian videos are things that you can do when you're doing the religious ministry inside of the system working with women. Community reintegration ministries, their purpose is to assist women in regaining their lives and family dignity. Reintegration is simply that you're helping that person to get back into the community and to make it. They got to integrate back into society because things change once you get locked up for 2 years or 3 years, and if you're locked up 10, 15, and 20, it's a complete metamorphosis. And so we had a guy come from the Appalachians in East Tennessee, and he had been locked up for 26 years. And he didn't know anything about what was going on the outside. So we had to try to take him to town on almost like we do young people on field trips and let him see what's going on in the city. And we got inside of one of the department stores, and the escalator, they keep rolling. He was scared to get on the escalator because he said, I don't know about those rolling steps. Because he hadn't seen the escalators before. And these guys, have to be reintegrated. And one guy, he finished his sentence. It expired. There was no more time for him to be in the prison. The warden put him out to send him home in the daytime. At night, he came back and crawled back into prison because it was a work release center and there was no gates, no fence around. He came back and got back in his own bed that he had for 24 years. And the warden said, no, you can't stay here. You got to go. But he didn't know how to reintegrate. There was nobody there to help him. So if people don't have people to help them to reintegrate back into society, then it's going to be hard for them to do so. And they would just assume to go get a rock and throw it through a window so that they can get back in because they're totally institutionalized. To use testimonies and experiences and expertise to encourage women to be survivors and not victims. It's interesting, it's important for them to know that they are a survivor, to let them know that they are an overcomer. I like the way that Sister White said it. She said there is no cultivated or inherited tendency that you cannot overcome. And so they must know that. And I like one of the quotes from the book Education. It says that higher than the human thought can reach is God's idea for his children. Godliness and God-likeness is the goal to be attained. And so they need to be encouraged to know that you are not a victim, that you are a survivor, and that you can make it. And because you failed at some things a few times, hey, look, Thomas Edison failed at getting the light bulb to shine for several times before he got it to shine. And then, some Bermuda grass grow best when you try to kill it. You only have a pearl because of a diseased oyster. And how a mockingbird sing with a broken wing and a jackrabbit run with a broken leg. You may fail at some things, but you never know what a success is unless you failed at something. Another thing is to share that we are living testimonies, saved in the fire, not from the fire. Okay, so when you are locked up, you may be in the fire, but you saved in the fire because the change comes. And one of the things that really, I think, turned my life around a lot is when I was going through one of the most disappointing points in my life before I really turned over into prison ministry and started doing that, was the bitter experience that I had probably with the president of the South Central Conference. It was a bitter experience that I had, and that was the thing that really turned me around. And I was so angry and so bitter, and that if I could have caught him, I said that I would have beat the tar out of him. Now that's what I said to myself, but that was just an experience that I was going through. But the Lord came to me, and he said it this way. He said, Clee, you can become bitter or you can become better. Which one are you going to choose? That's right. I took being better. And as soon as I took it, all the doors opened up. All the shackles dropped off, and I never looked back. And it's just how God has to work with you when you're in the fire. And sometimes you have to get singed a little bit and burned a little bit for you to recognize, hey, I got to do something different and straighten up. Another thing to help women deal constructively with guilt, shame, rejection, denial, and separation, anxiety. I'm glad y'all helping me see, because I'm not focusing through all this. I got to change that so I can see better. But those things are needed to help women to get through those things. And they go through a lot of those feelings when they are locked up. And you know how to help them to get through them. We mentioned the Angel Tree program. We mentioned support. Girl Scout Behind Bars is a program where they were helping girls to be able to spend the weekend with their mothers inside the prison. And there was a program that some prisons have, and I don't know whether anyone have it down this way, but it was one that I saw when I was doing some research. Parenting, they need a lot of help in parenting and education for moms. They really need some help in that area also. And if you can get a lady educated and become independent, that would help her out a lot. So I try to suggest to even young ladies today, I try to suggest to them, please get your education so that if you have to make it by yourself, you can. That you don't have to feel like you're in prison and in a situation you can't live in and you feel like you can't get out of it, you won't be locked up. Dues for ministry to women inmates. Some of the same thing that goes on with men. You have to obey all the rules of the prison. There are things that you leave, like pocketbooks, wallets, briefcases, money, and those kind of things in your cars. Carry your ID. Be prepared to submit to a search at any time. And usually, when they know you and you've been coming in for a while, they don't carry you through a big search. Don't be surprised if you had to go through, a pretty close search at times, almost, a frisk. That may happen. Now I doubt anybody can make you strip search, but but you can go through a good frisk. Keep promises that you make to inmates. And again, it points back, don't promise anything that you can't do. But if you do promise, please make sure that you do those things. Okay, I hope I didn't skip too many. Always consult with the institutional chaplain or leader of your ministry group when you're in doubt. Like I said earlier, if you have a question, please ask and get clarity for your question. And don't just go on your own and say, I think this is the way it should be, and this is what I'm going to do. Well, you might be doing the wrong thing, but be sure that you ask. Always be a Christian friend to inmates. Now, you draw a line on a Christian. Be a Christian friend to inmates. Don't feel like you have to be a buddy, but be a Christian friend. A Christian friend, it means that you're going to always separate right from wrong, and you're going to do the right thing. And you're going to do it in a way that Christ would have you to do it. Share your faith with inmates. The Lord gave it to you, so don't keep it all to yourself. Tell them about Jesus. Tell them about how you overcome. Tell them what God has done for you. There's no greater testimony than to tell somebody what Jesus has done for you. Be dependable. You got to be trustworthy. Be patient. Be honest. Be a good listener. And don't carry items without being approved. Be trustworthy. Don't share personal and confidential information.